In the previous video, I ended by chiseling out the fairing compound at the edge of this panel because it added a lot of weight to the panel. So now I'm going to show you a better way. I'm laying chopped strand mat in the edge of each of the door panels. And in a few cases where it has to go around a corner, I found it helpful to tear out little bits of the chopped strand mat and just cement them into the corner with some resin. This is because I beveled these edges of the panel inward so that the door will close easier. The inside of the door is just a little bit smaller than the outside, and that makes a compound curve at this corner, which at times could be difficult to get the chopped strand to go around, but in most cases I didn't have to do this. Teasing it into the corner just right. Most of it isn't that tedious. See, the flat part is easy. I'm mainly trying to get, I'm not filling in the holes. I'm just getting resin at the tops of the honeycombs where they contact the chopped strand, and especially on the glass where each face of the door meets the edge here. And now I'm going through with the straight piece, and as you can see, most of the straight pieces I can get to wrap around the corner. This is more of a close-up, and you can see the chopped strand mat becomes transparent once it's completely saturated with resin. And it makes it clear how it's stuck, to see, just at the very tops of the honeycombs, a little bit in the middle and along the edge right there. That's what holds this to the door for the most part, is that little 1 millimeter attachment to each of the front and back faces of the door. You can see the bevel on that corner. That's why I had to put in the little strips on that other spot. But see, this one is working out. I might have done myself a disservice trying to hang this on the vertical. I was trying to do 2 or 3 sides at a time. And it might have worked out better if I had just waited for that to get tacky and then turn it. I've got a big bubble here, and wherever you've got a bubble underneath the glass, you have to cut it out. Now, the scissors maybe wasn't the best tool for the job, and I'll fill that in when I lay a piece of chopped strand over this top part. Now, the chopped strand goes past the edge, so it sticks up on the flat part here. And I can just use the sander to knock it down. The sander, until that edge is knocked down, the sander doesn't contact anything but the edge, so it takes it off pretty quick. Now, there were a few spots like that, and here, well, it's in the shade, there, where that chopped strand strip wasn't completely attached to the face parts of the door. So I'm going to have to come back and do something about this. It's not hard. I've got a little bit of catalyzed resin, and as I run the brush over that edge, it's leaving just a little tiny bead of resin where the top meets the edge. And that gets down into those little gaps and fills them in. And then I just knock the excess down with the sander and I'm good to go. I don't think that core is strong enough to, say, screw hinges into. So I'm trying to remove a little strip of core at the edge of this door so that I can inlay a piece of wood and screw my hinges to the wood. Now, this is a wood chisel, but it's just not the right tool for the job. The plastic in that core is really tough stuff. Even after struggling, here I'm test fitting my wood inlay, and I've got the core gouged out a lot deeper than it has to be in some spots, but there's still one or two spots that are just a tiny bit high. And so when I try to tap the wood down into the trench I just hollowed out, it's rocking back and forth like a seesaw. So I'm going to have to try to do something. Here I'm using a concrete chisel to knock the core down. But here I'm going to try something different that works a lot better. I've made a mark at the top and bottom of where my inlay is going to be. And I'm using one of these oscillating tools with a metal cutting saw attachment, and I'm first trimming the top, and now on each side I'm going to go in and make plunge cuts down to the level of my lower line. And now I'm going to switch tools to the very narrow cutting tool. See how narrow that is? And that's the perfect thing to gouge the core out of the spot that I need to remove it from. And I can go in at an angle like this until I've got the blade all the way in, then turn the core and come in at an angle from the other side. And once I've cut it completely, I can pull out a little wedge of core. And now I come back, making as shallow a cut as I can down near the bottom there, and going in as far as the blade will reach. And now I come and cut backwards from the other side and remove a piece. And I can just go back and forth like that and cut out little chunks until I've got it hollowed out as much as I need. Here's a closer view. This is actually in the doghouse where the front door will attach. See, I can go in the depth of the blade, then come around from this side as shallow as I can cut and take out a chunk. Then again as shallow as I can till the blade is in as deep as it'll go, and then come from the other side and release that chunk that I just cut. So now the wood is inlaid into the edge. It's just glued in with some catalyzed resin. And I'm test fitting the doors. There's a lot of holes along the hinges for screws, but these first few test fits, I'm only going to put a screw at each end, because the doors are going to go in and out a few times before I'm done here. so I'm not stripping out the rest of the holes with my screws. I try to be gentle with the two end holes, but and as expected, the door doesn't fit perfectly. So I can come along now with a Sharpie, and I'm going to mark how far back I want to trim the door to try to get it to close. It's pretty easy just to make a little offset from the edge and go along. So here we go, we're removing those two screws and the door is coming out. Now I can adjust the size of the door. This belt sander lets me do real precision adjustments. It takes the material off fast enough to be worth doing, but slow enough that I have pretty good control over how much material I'm taking off. It's good for making a flat, and then I just rotate the part like this to make the corners round. Just like that. So, because of where I used the jigsaw, that cut is a little bit thinner, so the material sticks down a little bit right near the corners where the jigsaw was used. So I'm using some 40 grit sandpaper wrapped around a file and just sanding off a little bit, test fitting the door, sand off a little bit, working my way to a good fit. Here I've taken some off of the door and I've sanded through that chopped strand mat. So I'm going to have to widen the opening a bit because I don't really want to take off more from the door. This rotary rasp makes pretty quick work of widening these radiuses here at the corner. And once again, installing the doors. They're very close now. So it really doesn't matter if I put more of the screws in. I think this is, well, it turns out it's not really the last time, but it's almost the last time these go on here. So I'm filing a little bit at that corner. And I'm marking a little bit that I'm going to take off here with the rotary rasp. This is a little bit closer view, and you can see about how fast the rasp is taking off material. Fast enough to be worth doing, but not so fast that I'm losing control and taking too much off. And there, a little bit off at a time and a perfect fit. Now I've got some more fairing compound and I'm smoothing. I'm trying not to actually make the door any bigger because it's a perfect fit now. But I was smoothing the edge and also filling in some spots where I sanded through. And you use acetone to clean your tools. You can reuse that stuff over and over forever, but you need to clean it. I'm using a ladle to get gel coat out of the can without making a huge mess. I tried several different ways, like pouring it into the cup or using another cup to scoop some out, but this is the cleanest way. I'm adding 2 cc's of hardener to about half of a 10-ounce cup of gel coat, which is maybe a little bit much, but it hardens up pretty quick, and there doesn't seem to be a downside to that. Normally it's 1 or 2%. So, although I like to clean off my trowels, most of the other stuff that I use is disposable. These rollers are disposable. The cups I mix in are disposable. And instead of using one of those paint trays and trying to clean it every time, it's far easier to just get a big stack of paper plates and use them one time and throw them away, and then use another the next time. So I've gone down, I've sanded the surface and gone down through the grits, and now after about a 1200 grit, I put some wax on them. And this is a piece of PVC pipe, and I'm sanding to get the surface very rough. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have like a finger hole to open these doors. And I want to do something to seal the core where I drill the hole through. So that's what the PVC is going to be for. And I'm marking where I want to drill the hole with little strips of painter's tape. I've got it centered on the door where that first tape is. And then I'm going to make all of the holes the same height above the bottom of the door so that they all look consistent. And so I've marked both directions with tape, and I'm using a hole saw that's just a little bit bigger than my PVC to make a hole here. And the pilot bit has made enough of a mark that I can see where my hole is going to be, so I'm peeling off the tape, and now I'll continue to make the hole. Notice how it's difficult to drill through the gel coat and the fiberglass, but then it just drops right into the core. And again, through the glass, and now through the core is very quick. And my hole saw wasn't really long enough to go all the way through, but the pilot hole did. So I can finish from the other side. And this is kind of interesting. Now I have a core sample of the panel that I just made. Look how thick the gel coat is on the left. And the right has just the layer of fiberglass built up. It's not going to peel off of the core. It's held on really strong. So here I'm using a piece of wax paper to protect the adhesive on a piece of painter's tape. And I've got a fitting that the PVC I'm using for my finger hole fits inside of. And I'm going to use this to trace a circle that's maybe 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch bigger than my PVC. And this is going to be a mask to go where I'm going to use gel coat to glue that PVC into the panel. I'm going to try and do this the way you do caulk, by putting down tape and then laying in the gel coat and then peeling the tape and trying to leave just a very narrow strip of gel coat. This is one of the mistakes that I made, and so I wind up doing it a different way in the end. But since I don't know any better at the moment, I'm very carefully applying my tape. And see, it's got a very neat little spot where this gel coat is going to go into the gap and also bond to that front surface. This is a dental syringe, and I just got them on Amazon, and they make a nice tool for applying resin or gel coat or things very precisely. If only this plan had worked. So now when I peel the tape, some of the gel coat comes up with the tape, but some of it lifts and then drops back down. It also leaves a big step at the edge there. This really, here you can see how it lifts and drops down a bit better. At any rate, that was a mess. But you can fix anything. And so now, instead of the syringe, I'm coming in and just painting some gel coat around the edge with a Q-tip. And I'm going to build this up a little bit so that I can come in with a Dremel and sandpaper and knock it down and try to get something presentable here after the catastrophe. So I'm using sort of a rounded tool on a Dremel in order to remove most of the material I want to remove quickly. I maybe got a little bit too aggressive with this. I think it had gotten a little bit concave into that front surface of the panel. And I'm following up with a piece of sandpaper that's rolled up like that. And with a little bit of work, surprisingly little, you can get a pretty nice result with that. This is after sanding and then going down through the grit. You can see how it's a little bit concave around where that's attached, where I got a little bit too aggressive with my sanding and my Dremel, but it'll be okay for now. And this is the finished doghouse. There's a nice glossy finish on it where I went down through the grits to a 1200 grit is where I stopped. And then you can either use some compound or I think here I just went straight to paste wax. I have learned though that if you do 1 or 2 passes with polishing compound, you'll get a much better gloss, and then go to paste wax. Here you can see how these wooden props hold the door open. They have that funny lightning bolt shaped cut at the bottom so that they can rest on the front and edge of the opening without protruding into the doghouse where it would take up space on the inside. And there's the big door that lets me get the generator in and out of the house that will have a lock on it. And these ventilation ports are all too small for the generator to fit out through them. So it's nice. It sits on the back of the boat now and keeps the generator out of the weather. It's a permanent place to house the generator, and I can leave it running and go at a dock and go off, and nobody's just going to pick up my generator and walk away with it if it's locked up in this box. So this concludes the educational video on building the generator doghouse part 2.